All right, this is Shelley Winters in the Poseidon Adventure. Y'all have seen this about 100 times. I'm so mortified by it. But this is the time capsule version of my show. So I might as well do everything I know. Shelley Winters in the Adventure, the Poseidon Adventure.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. It is exactly 50 seconds to midnight. Please stand and fill your glasses. Oh, baby.
Mr. Mark, don't be by yourself tonight. Come, stand next to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, quiet, please. 10 seconds. 9.
Hello, I'm film historian Tony Maeda.
And I'm Brad Shreve, who's just a guy who likes movies.
We discuss movies and television from Hollywood's golden age. We go behind the scenes and share our opinions, too.
And of course, being the average guy, my opinions are the ones that matter.
As does your self-delusion. Welcome to Going Hollywood. Brad, let me ask you a question. How long can you hold your breath? Do me a favor. Try it now, because I tell you what, I was the underwater swim champ of Meadville, Pennsylvania. I can hold my breath for 2 minutes and 47 seconds. Time him. Somebody time him.
I'm not even going to try because I cannot hold my breath very long.
Well, then, you're not trained to do this like I am. I am trained to do this. Please let me help out. Please.
Every time I've had surgery, they almost backed out because of my breathing. So, no, I trust you. Are you going to be able to swim 30, 35 feet? What was it?
In the water, I'm a very skinny lady. I'm a very skinny lady above the water, too. Let's face it. Well, everybody, it's week 2 of our twin disaster movies. And if you haven't figured it out yet by that very pithy little opening, we are talking about the Poseidon Adventure from 20th Century Fox in 1972.
And Tony, before we begin talking about Poseidon Adventure, I have got to make a clarification about something that was said last week.
Oh, okay.
You said it was a movie I picked out. And let me take you back in time. I one day said, you know what, maybe we should do a month of disaster films. And you were like, right away, you said, oh, that's a great idea. So we started planning, like, what are we going to do? And we talked about the different films. And we said, we have to do Airport. It was the first. And I preferred Poseidon Adventure. And I think you preferred Towering Inferno. Well, then we decided not to do a whole month. We were like,
right.
Maybe we won't.
We
weren't even sure we were going to. Yeah, we weren't even sure we were going to do any. And then it was either on the phone or in an email, you said, I just watched Airport. Let's do Airport. Do you remember that?
Well, okay.
I thought when you saw that, I thought, oh, it must be a great film. It's been so long since I saw it.
You may have.
And then, because when we started this show, you said, I don't want to do movies I don't like, because that's not any fun. And I'm like, well, there's lots of shows that do bad movies. But you chose to do a bad movie. Why was that? Because it was the first?
What? Okay, wait a minute. I didn't say I didn't like Airport. I didn't say that it was a bad movie. I said it was a different kind of movie. I don't think, and that's interesting you're bringing this up right now, because my feelings are, even though Airport is called the granddaddy of all disaster films, I really feel this film, The Poseidon Adventure, is really the father of disaster films. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. This is the real first disaster film that I know of. Well, if you think of San Francisco back, I don't know when that was. That was a pretty big disaster film. What, in the 30s or 40s? That was a great film, actually.
Oh, yeah. Spencer Tracy and Jeanette MacDonald and Clark Gable. Yes, however, this is the first one with the All-Star. This is at the template, the All-Star cast. Disaster. This one happens, and I timed it. This one happens 30 minutes inside this movie. This ship is upside down. So it's pretty quick. You get just enough wonderful exposition. The thing about Airport, and I don't want to rehash what we did last week, but as we said about Airport, it just feels like a drama, which just happens to have a saboteur on a plane.
Yes.
But it doesn't feel like a disaster movie. This, to me, and also because it was created by someone who became to be known as the master of disaster, Mr. Irwin Allen himself, this really feels like the ultimate grandfather of disaster films.
And if you look at some of the TV shows that he produced in the 60s, he was the master disaster way before this film ever came out.
He was. Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Lost in Space.
Hey, I loved Lost in Space.
Land of the Giants, yeah.
The Time Machine, which was pretty bad. And oh my God, Land of the Giants.
It
was awful.
Yeah, Irwin Allen was quite a character, and I'm excited to talk about him. But I think what I love about the Poseidon Adventure, and watching it again, first of all, there are 15 freaking Oscar winners in this film. It's amazing. And depending upon what level of Oscar winner you were, that was when you got dispatched, basically. You know what I mean? But there were also, not only were there, Shelley Winters and Jack Albertson and Red Buttons and Gene Hackman and Ernest Borgnine, Oscar winners, and also, Sterling Sullivan, who wrote the screenplay. It goes on and on and on. The number of Oscar winners. In fact, when Gene Hackman won his Oscar for The French Connection, which happened while they were filming this, they gave him a big cake and they all came together. I don't know, there's a famous picture of them all with their Oscars and Gene Hackman with his Oscar. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
It's a fun picture. So yeah, this if Death on the Nile was a boatload of dames, the Poseidon Adventure is a boatload of Oscar winners. That's probably why it capsized. Too many damn Oscars in this ship.
And I've stated many times I don't like comparing the originals to the remakes. Well, we did it with A Star Is Born.
Right.
I am going to talk about the 2006 remake, Poseidon, here and there, because it's not just a comparison of these two movies. It's going to be a comparison between disaster films of old and disaster films of new.
Well, you're on your own with that because... Okay, hold on to your phones. I've never seen the remake.
Be grateful.
I kind of am. Yes, I am a film historian, but historian is the word in there. I have no desire to see a new film based on a film that I love so much. And I really do love this film. I was thinking about it. You and I said, I also love Towering Inferno. I go back and forth. But watching this again, and the reason I love this film so much is the humor. This film has so much humor. All the humor that's lacking in Airport is in this film. And I think that is, and not only humor, camp. There's so much camp. I was thinking, what is the definition of camp? Everyone always wants to know what that is. And here's your answer. Stella Stevens and Pamela Sue Martin swimming in high heels is your definition of camp.
I was defending them for that. Because they climbed up a lot of things that would have been hard with bare feet.
Shelley Winters kicked off her shoes. She did. She was trained to do this. She's trained. You love the way she does the diver's stance, and then she just dives. That's a pretty damn good dive.
She did a damn good dive.
She trained. She trained for 2 months with a scuba diver to do that scene. And she also, allegedly, Johnny Weissmuller was her swimming instructor back in Brooklyn back in the day. But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So I'm glad we're doing Poseidon Adventure, Brad. I think it's a wonderful way to really set the tone for this whole disaster film genre. And it's also our last one. So our first one and our last one. And as many people probably know, this, maybe they don't, but there were 2 Oscar wins. This movie was nominated for 9 Oscars. 9. One of which was Shelley Winters as Best Supporting Actress. Now, she won the Golden Globe, but she didn't win the Oscar. But it also won Best Song, which is a very, 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 very overplayed song In the movie, it's called The Song from the Poseidon Adventure, which is kind of interesting. But everybody else in the world knows it as The Morning After. And, of course, the song that everybody hears was recorded by Maureen McGovern. Maureen McGovern does not sing it in this film. But did you know the song was originally called Why Must There Be a Morning After? Not There's Got to Be a Morning After?
No, I didn't know that. And actually, I was quite surprised watching this that it wasn't Maureen McGovern because I remembered that it was.
No, it wasn't. It was, allegedly sung by Carol Lindley, but it was actually dubbed by a singer named Renee Armand. But yeah, the song was originally called Why Must There Be a Morning After, but the record company thought that was much too depressing. And so it became There's Got to Be a Morning After. But, which begs the question, why? Why has there got to be a morning after? There's not a morning after for a lot of people on this ship. There's 6 people there was a morning after, so that we know of. Obviously, this is a fictional story, but, I'm taking it one step further. Mm-hmm. So why did you wanted to do this film, Brad? What is it about this movie that you love that made you want it to be one of our choices for our disaster film little mini festival? Because
there was a great cast, and not just a great cast, great characters that I liked, characters that I hated. The ones I hated, I liked hating.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just a disaster. The disaster was great, especially for 1972 when you consider all these were practical effects. Wow.
Amazing.
So you had this great disaster film on top of great characters that I cared about whether they lived or died.
Yeah. Great special effects. And you're absolutely right. All done and not done. There's no CGI here, folks. There was no CGI back then. And on a budget of $5 million. That's what's remarkable to me. Incredible special effects. And it was $5 million. And we'll talk about the whole budgeting snafu because that was a whole thing. But I think that, you talked a bit about the characters. Yes, all the humor that's lacking in the characters in Airport is in this film. All of these characters are engaging characters. They're funny characters. They're frustrating characters. There's evil characters. There's good characters. But they're characters as opposed to the archetypes we saw in Airport. And I think that's what I really enjoy about this. And it only takes them 30 minutes to set up these characters and their stories. It doesn't take them the 2 hours it takes in Airport to get this movie going. Mm-hmm. So since we're talking about this, do we want to talk a little bit about the background in Irwin Allen, the master of disaster, and how this all came about?
Sure. I brought up some of the shows that he did in the 60s. Mm-hmm. Like you said, we did Lost in Space, which I don't know how much you watched Lost in Space. In the first season, especially the first half of the first season, the special effects weren't that great. It was the 60s. But it was a damn good show. Yeah. And then, it turned camp.
Yes.
And Dr. Smith turned from this very well done evil character, almost too evil, to about the most campy thing that ever happened on television.
Yes.
Then you had the Time Tunnel, Land of the Giants. And then this was, as far as I know, now you may know earlier, this to me was the first big movie. And then we had the Swiss Family Robinson not long after this, which I loved as a kid. I don't know if it's really a good film. The Swarm, which is one of the worst, but fun worst, disaster films with Killer Bees, back when everybody thought Killer Bees was going to destroy the whole country.
The big thing, yeah.
And sadly, very sadly, he did Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, which I only watched about half. I couldn't take any more.
We'll get to it. We'll get to that. Yeah, that's a very... Well, you also forgot the big one. The big one in there. This is the Towering Inferno.
Oh, I thought I did. Okay, yeah.
A movie so big it needed 2 studios. That is how big the Towering Inferno was. So when you think about it, here's a movie at one studio for $5 million, and it was such a tremendous success that the sequel, if you will, the air quote sequel, the Towering Inferno, the budget was so huge. It was such a big project. There were 2 studios who made it. So that's kind of an interesting. He really exploded, Irwin Allen, and he did. He began as a film and TV producer. He worked for 20th Century Fox, but then when Fox started to downscale after the disaster of Cleopatra, he switched to television. But he always wanted to come back to film. And Irwin Allen, we know it now, it makes sense. He's been compared to P.T. Barnum, Cecil B. DeMille, because his motto was, give me more and make it bigger. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think that's a pretty good motto to have. But he really wanted to move back to film, and he found this bestseller he wanted to make into a film. And it was called The Poseidon Adventure, and it was written by Paul Gallico. And in the novel, did you know this, Brad? And again, are we still doing spoiler alerts? Sometimes I throw one out, sometimes I don't. I don't remember, but
it's hit or miss.
who hasn't seen this movie? If you haven't seen this movie, come on. So turn us off if you haven't, blah, 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 blah. So in the book, The Poseidon Adventure, the ship sinks. It doesn't float, which I think is really interesting. So he purchased the film rights to the book. He made it his next file. He went to Fox to finance it, and they were kind of reluctant. And they okayed the budget of $5 million. Now, for comparison here, way back when we had our What's Up Doc episode last season, do you happen to remember what, and I'm really putting you to the test here, do you remember what the budget for What's Up Doc was?
I don't.
$4 million.
Oh.
$1 million of which went to the chase at the end.
Yeah, I believe
so. You have a comedy that is budgeted at $4 million, and you have a disaster movie which is budgeted at $5 million. So this is how little Fox believed in this film. But he was determined to do it, and he had a cast in mind. Do you know any of these first choices that he had by any chance?
No, that I don't.
So he originally guess who he wanted to play Reverend Scott. Not too hard to figure out. Think about our last episode. Who do you suppose he wanted to play Bert? It wasn't Dino.
Burt Lancaster?
Yeah, to play Bert. I'm sorry, I just gave it away, didn't I? Yes.
Well, that's all right. That's who I was going to say anyway.
Yeah, he wanted Burt Lancaster, but Burt Lancaster says, not another piece of crap. No, thank you. Here's one that you kind of are lukewarm about. You know who he wanted for the Red Buttons part? He originally wanted Gene Wilder.
Ah, interesting.
Maybe he just wanted the Ginge. Did you think he just wanted the Ginge? And so since Gene Wilder said no, he went, all right, who's the other ginger actor? Oh, Red Buttons. Let's do that. Petula Clark, he wanted for the role of Nani, that annoying character, and she said no, so we got Carol Lindley. And this is what he did, and this is what kind of set the template for this, and they did it a little bit in Airport, too. He looked to older actors who were still who were still held in very high esteem. Hello, we said 15 Oscars. Obviously, those weren't all actors, but was a huge Oscar-winning cast, but who were on their way down. Gene Hackman was the only, air quotes, hot actor in this film at that time this film was made.
Now, this was before the French Connection, right?
The French Connection happened, and then this happened. Okay. And while he was filming this film, he won the Oscar for French Connection, which is great. You want an actor who's while they're making your movie wins an Oscar, because that's immediate. That's another, $20 million in box office.
And I think you told me that already earlier, but okay, yeah.
That's all right. I'm not repeating myself. So who else do we have? Do you want to list off some of these cast members here, and I'll tell you a little bit about them once they come up, because it's quite a roster of people here.
In addition to Gene Hackman, we had Ernest Borgnine, who played Rogo, a police detective. They kind of never really say if he's still a detective or not, but
no, he retired. He retired because he and his wife, who we'll get to, are now going around the world.
Yes,
on trips.
Speaking of his wife, Linda Rogo, that was the Stella Stevens, the most delightful, fun-loving character in the film.
Linda.
My favorite character, who I loved and adored, Shelley Winters as Belle Rosen, grandmother.
Belle.
Grandmother going to see her grandchildren for the first time. And Jack Albertson, who I also really enjoy, Manny Rosen as her husband. Mm-hmm. Then we had Red Buttons as Martin. He was just a single guy on the ship. Roddy McDowell, who is funny after the big success of Planet of the Apes, granted he had makeup on the whole time, that he had kind of a relatively small role for the main cast.
Roddy.
Can
I tell you how much I love? Go ahead.
He was a server in the restaurant there on the ship.
Yeah, he was. I think he was Irish.
Yep.
Can I tell you how much I love the fact that we're talking about a film that has Roddy? Roddy was basically every great movie star's best gay boyfriend.
Yes.
I mean, he's so Elizabeth Taylor, Barbara, Judy, Lauren Bacall, Debbie Reynolds, Montgomery Clift. They all loved Roddy. And listener, if you have an opportunity, go on YouTube and just type in Roddy McDowell Summer House or Roddy McDowell Malibu 60s. There is some wonderful footage. Roddy had wonderful Sunday afternoon parties at his Malibu beach house. And there are home movies of it. Now, there's no sound, but they're so glorious because you're going to see from 1965, you're going to see Judy Garland. You're going to see Rock Hudson. You're going to see Jane Fonda, Julie Andrews, Natalie Wood. I mean, it's unbelievable. Lauren Bacall. It's just so thrilling for me to. That's my fantasy, to go back to that beach house. And Roddy's adorable too. But I love the fact that we're talking about a film that has Roddy McDowall, because Roddy McDowall is a great unsung hero of classic Hollywood, in my opinion.
I agree with you. So to round out the cast, we had the Carol Lindley. I don't know why she didn't win an Oscar. She's one of the best actresses I've ever seen in my life. I just felt sorry for her throughout the whole film.
Oh God!
I'm like,
what are you gonna do with that part? Nani. The name tells you alone. Oh God!
Yes,
my character's
yes.
name is Nani. Oy.
And rounding out the cast, we have Pamela Sue Martin, Leslie Nielsen, back when he did drama roles, and the most obnoxious child in movie history, Eric Shea as Robin. And I've never read the novel. I'm almost certain my dad told me that Robin drowns. Remember the scene where he was saved when?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure my dad said that he drowned at that moment. I'm like, oh, that would have been much better.
Missed opportunity there, Sterling Silverman, to make him live. Yeah, he's quite annoying. Eric O'Shea. It's funny. He just started doing films. He was in Yours, Mine, and Ours, which was a Lucille Ball film from '68, which was a big hit. He played one of her kids, and he was also in a bunch of TV shows in the '60s and '70s. But his two brothers voiced the character of Linus in the Peanuts specials of the '60s. So when you're watching a Peanuts, you think that sounds like the kid from the Poseidon Adventure. Close. It's his brothers.
I knew they did that. I never caught that the voices were similar. I have to think about it, because Linus was my favorite.
Yeah, when you think about Linus, there's a little bit of a sibilance. But just to swing back on some of these people, Stella Stevens, dear God. I think this is probably the other role she's best known for is the Nutty Professor, but she did a lot of TV. She was a Playmate of the Month in 1960. And it's funny because Irwin Allen asked her if she'd read the book, and she said no. And he said, good, because in the book, people hate your character, and we don't want that. We want you to be funny. And Stella Stevens is so funny in this. The relationship between Stella and Ernest Borgnine, who play husband and wife, he was a cop, she was a hooker, and he kept arresting her to keep her off the street. And of course, they ended up married. So it's very funny. It's very combative. It's very, very much what they're doing is the 70s version of Wallace Beery and Jean Harlow in Dinner at 8. Now, I don't think you've probably ever seen. Have you ever seen Dinner at 8, Brad?
No, I haven't.
Classic film from 33. We should talk about Dinner at 8 sometime. But it's very combative, but it's very funny. She's very much the loudmouth, kind of classless dame, and he's also very classless, but they suddenly have money in Dinner at 8. Very, very similar kind of combative situation, loving situation. One of my favorite lines is after the ship capsizes and they're all like looking around for each other, and she's there with Gene Hackman, and Ernest Borgnine comes up behind her, and she turns and she says, "Where the hell have you been?" And he says, "What do you think, flying around on my ass?" They're great together.
That line made me laugh. I got to tell you, as I liked every character. I even liked their characters, but it did get a bit too much. Just
their relationship?
Yeah. I mean, it's just chill out just a minute and act like you love each other for at least 30 seconds.
Well, then she gets dispatched. So I guess as everyone else was tired, like, let's get rid of Stella Stevens. Bye, Stella. Which is always very sad. A couple of these other actors that you mentioned, I just want to briefly touch on. Of course, we must. The incredible, incomparable Shelley Winters as Mrs. Rosen. Two-time Oscar winner Shelley Winters, also known as Shirley. Shelley, also known as Shirley. That's what the name of her autobiography is. Great, great book, by the way. She won her Oscars for A Patch of Blue and The Diary of Anne Frank. And, Shelley, she was kind of a nut job. She was one of the very first group of method actors. She was actually good friends with Marilyn Monroe. And Debbie Reynolds tells very funny stories about dealing with her method ways when they were making that hagsploitation film, What's the Matter with Helen? And it's very funny stories. But, did you know that Shelley Winters began her career really as a sex pot?
Yes, I've seen the pictures because I knew that she and Marilyn were friends. In fact, they were roommates.
Yeah, they were. Shelley taught Marilyn the open mouth smile, according to Shelley.
And I also heard she taught her some of the glamour stuff. I don't know if that's true, but you would know more than I do.
It's true.
But I was curious, so I had to look up old pictures of them, and she was a knockout.
She was. But here's what's funny. She found her real success playing these annoying and irritating women who usually end up dead at the end of the movie. Like you think about A Place in the Sun, Lolita, this movie, she's very lovable in this film as Mrs. Rosen,
yes.
But she's also a real nudge and she's also a real pain in the ass. But she's wonderful. And she did gain 35 pounds to play Mrs. Rosen. And she claimed she was never able to lose it again.
She really never did.
She didn't. She stayed a big woman really for the rest of her career. And she worked until, not that long ago. Remember, she was on Roseanne. She played Roseanne's grandmother. You remember that?
Yes, she did. Yeah, I barely remembered that.
She had a career. I think one of her last movies was Stepping Out with Liza in the 90s. So, she worked a very long, long time. So I love that Shelley Winters, we got her here. Jack Albertson, another Oscar winner for one of my favorite movies, The Subject Was Roses in 1968. Later, of course, he was in the TV show, which I'm sure we'll never see again, Chico and the Man.
And I was thinking about Chico and the Man. I loved it when I was younger. I doubt that held up, but it was a lot of fun.
It was. And Red Buttons, another actor who won an Oscar, supporting actor Oscar, comic. He's in They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Which is a movie I think you and I are going to talk about soon. I love that film. And of course, we have to talk about Leslie Nielsen because, talk about this man. He was a serious dramatic actor and a leading man. He was in Forbidden Planet, Tammy and the Bachelor, but it was this whole deadpan, deeply serious line delivery that made him such a phenomenon in Airplane and all the Naked Gun movies.
Yes.
And you see it in this movie. One of my favorite things is when they're looking through the binoculars and they see the wave coming at them, and all he does is say, "Oh my God," and that's it. Oh my God, he's done. So yeah, we have a great cast here. We have all brought together by Irwin Allen and his director Ronald Neame. Now, Ronald Neame was an interesting choice. He had just directed that great action-adventure movie, The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. So you kind of wonder why he chose him. But here's why he chose him. Because Irwin Allen actually directed the action sequences in this film.
Oh.
That was his thing. He wanted Ronald Neame for the acting, for the intimate acting scenes. And I think he was a really interesting and very good choice.
Well, yeah, it shows. It's just... this isn't the greatest movie ever made, but it's just damn enjoyable. I never get tired of watching this film.
It is enjoyable. It is. It's a lot of fun. And even though, he only had a budget of $5 million, so he's in pre-production for the movie, and he's called in. There's a new president at Fox because, presidents of movie studios change every 6 months. There's a new president. He was called into the new president's office, and the new president said, just matter of factly, "Oh, by the way, we're canceling your film." And Irwin Allen's like, "What? What? What are you talking about? So he convinced them to give him half of it. Do you know the story?
No.
He had half the budget taken away from him. So he only had $2.5 million to work with. And he thought, I've got to get another $2.5 million. So this is what makes a great producer. We don't have this anymore. This is what these great classic film producers did. He left Fox. He goes across the street to the Hillcrest Country Club, right across the street from Fox. And he saw two of his friends there playing gin rummy. And they were producers Cheryl Corwin and Steve Broidy. All right? They were still film executives. And he asked them, would they guarantee $2.5 million? And they said they would if he left them alone to play gin rummy. They were never even asked to write a check. But based on the guarantee of another $2.5 million, this movie went forward. And can you imagine the return on that investment? This movie made how much did this movie make? When all was said and done, Brad?
I found different numbers on different sites, so I wasn't sure. Now, the number I saw was 93 million, and that may have only been that first year. I don't know.
Well, the numbers I have it was 126 million. That's the number I have right now. But regardless,
It made a lot.
That's a huge return on the investment of 2.5 million. That's just a paper investment. They never wrote a check. So pretty damn amazing. It's pretty damn amazing. So yeah. So I think when we want to talk about this movie, we have a little bit of the background here. Do you think we should, how do you want to approach this? Because, you know, you and I have talked before, and we don't like being a podcast that gives plot point by plot point. We don't like that. So should we just do it like in order of movie star dispatch? Like who gets killed off first, or what do you want to do?
Well, yes, but first let me just say what the movie's about, because this is very, very quick and easy.
Oh, very important. Very
It's
important.
the SS Poseidon, which is an older ship on its final voyage. There is an earthquake undersea near Greece, and a giant tsunami crashes into the side of the ship. This is during New Year's Eve, right when the vast majority of the passengers are in this New Year's Eve party.
Yes.
And it knocks the ship upside down, and the ship is floating upside down. And we have our star-studded cast who is climbing to the top, which is really the bottom,
Right.
to be saved.
Up to the bottom. They're climbing up to the bottom.
Yes.
I think the tagline for this movie was "Hell Upside Down." It's like, oh,
Yes,
wow,
it
that's
was.
great. Yeah.
That is a great line.
Yeah, it is a great line. It is a great line. Yeah, and what I think is so funny about this movie is as it starts out like it's a true story. They say, you know,
Mhm. Yes.
at midnight on New Year's Eve, and a tsunami, the Poseidon Adventure came up with a tragedy. This is their story. It's not a true story. You'd be
I
amazed.
know, that really bothered me. I mean, I knew it wasn't a true story, but I thought that really throws people off. It
It
makes them think
does.
this is true.
This is their story. Do you know how many times when I was researching this, how many times, like when I would go online, you'd see the question, is the Poseidon Adventure a true story? Or what happened to the people of the Poseidon Adventure? And I'm like, they're fiction. That's what happened to them.
And not to burst anybody's bubble out there, can this happen? Yes. It can. A ship can go upside down. However, engineers say the chances of people surviving are about 1 in a billion.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, yeah, come on.
but who cares? This is a fun movie.
Well, you know what I love about this film? How we said like it's a template for the rest of the disaster films of the '70s with the all-star cast, with they're kind of like Walter Mitty-ish. I think that's what Irwin Allen's wife said. Walter Mitty syndrome. It's these ordinary people thrown into extraordinary situations. There's always a bastard in these disasters. There's always somebody who, because they want to cut back on money, they want trying to save money, or they're under a time crunch. They're the real catalyst for the disaster. And in this film, it's a guy named Lenarkos. He's the representative of the new owners of the ship, who are going to trash it, by the way. But he just wants to, he's already late. They're 3 days behind. And so he's paying a wrecking crew in Athens. And that's why he wants to move along. That's why he's like, full steam ahead, full steam ahead. Every day's costing me money. So he doesn't let Leslie Nielsen, who plays the captain, take on ballast, which would have stabilized the ship more had he been able to do it. And so that's the real reason why the ship capsized. And there's always some bastard who causes these destructions. In Towering Inferno, it's, the corners that were cut in the tower. It's crazy. There's always some prick who's causing these problems.
And I didn't think that guy was really necessary to the story. It really added nothing. Just a little bit of tension to, with the captain, but
Right.
It could have just been an accident. What was funny is, because there is, as you said, always these characters in these movies. This guy reminded me almost identical to the attorney in Jurassic Park.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. Yeah.
The way he stood, the way he talked.
Yeah, I agree with you. I
I wish we could have seen more of a gruesome death with this guy, like the attorney got gobbled up. But
yeah, I don't know. I don't think he was necessary either. I mean, I think the fact that you have this 90-foot tall wall of water coming towards you, I mean, you got to suspend your disbelief in some way. So they're kind of gilding the lily here to say, well, the real reason it turned over was because they didn't have any ballast. They didn't have a ballast, so the ship couldn't stay up. It couldn't stay stabilized. But I don't think you need it. It's just, you got to have somebody to blame for this. And of course, he's one of the first gone. Once that water goes over, once the water comes up over not the engine room. What's it called where the captain and the crew are?
I was trying to think of what that's called. It's the ship version of a cockpit.
All right, there you go.
I'm
We'll go
embarrassed
with
I
that.
don't know. I come from a whole family of naval people, and I can't think of the name.
Oh, wow, you are. That's pathetic, Brad. I don't feel quite so pathetic. But anyway, he's a goner real quick, as is Leslie. Bye-bye, Leslie. You don't worry. You're going to have a phenomenal career once Airplane is made. So, and you're also going to marry Dorothy Zbornak on The Golden Girls. So good for you, Leslie Nielsen. So, yes, the ship gets turned over 30 minutes into this movie, of course, while they're all singing Auld Lang Syne, which I also love. They're flipping upside down. And we talked a little bit about how the special effects in this movie were achieved without any kind of computer animation. What they did, do you know what they did to actually get the capsizing of the dining room scene?
I know that they had it on, for lack of a better word, a machine that actually tilted it. It didn't go all the way around, but they certainly at the beginning.
It was a forklift.
Yeah, it was going up.
They lifted the side of the set up with a forklift and basically dumped the actors out. That's how they achieved that. There were two sets, of course. There was a set that they turned upside down with a forklift. So, hello. I mean, you can't get much more elementary than that. Pretty genius.
Yeah.
And then there was a second set, obviously, of the ship upside down. What it was like after it was upside down. But that is such, and nobody got hurt, by the way. This is what's amazing to me, and this is what was really important. According to the actors, it was really important to Irwin Allen that nobody get hurt. And this is pretty dangerous, turning your actors upside down to a 45-degree angle and then a 90-degree. Come on.
Yes.
Really crazy. But they didn't. They did not get hurt. Even the most famous, people call it the most famous shot from the Poseidon Adventure. And it's the shot where the character of Terry, who's kind of been putting the moves on Pamela Sue Anderson's character.
I didn't know that's the one who fell through there. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, he's putting the moves on her, and they go and dance on the dance floor, and they do, will you dance? And then they start doing their own thing, which I think is so funny. It's so 70s. His name is Terry. The character's name is Terry. And the actor's name is Ernie Orsatti. And he used to be a stuntman. And then he had segued to just being an actor. And he was really excited because he's like, oh, I actually have a part in this big production as an actor. And then they say to him, we need you to do this stunt. And he's like, of course, that's why you cast me. But it is. He's the one who's hanging from the table. And there's a big, beautiful, it's not a skylight, but it's a big, beautiful glass light.
Above the ballroom.
Of the ballroom, which would have been on the ceiling, but now it's below. And he's holding onto the table, and he loses his grip, and he falls, and he smashes right into that light. It's a fantastic shot.
It is. It's classic shot. I mean,
it is.
Everybody remembers it.
Everybody remembers it. Nobody knows that poor guy's name except me. I just told you. So spread the word, people, who it was. But he also
and
said,
I got to say, I don't blame Pamela for checking him out. I know she was more into the minister, but boy, he was rah.
I got Dynasty to look forward to later. So let me, but he said that there were a lot of visitors on the set that day. There were visitors on the set all the time to see these actors do this stunt because most of them who are names did many of their own stunts. Ernest Borgnine said that. He said it was really, you kind of got caught up in the adrenaline of it. And you're like doing things that normally you'd be like, I'm not doing that. Now, the only one who didn't, Roddy McDowall didn't do his real fall because it was too dangerous. But a lot of the other falls, and and we all know that was really Shelley Winters holding her breath for 2 minutes and 45 seconds, swimming underwater. So a lot of these actors did their own stunts, and apparently it was quite something to see.
Yeah, I remember her on Johnny Carson one day saying, I think she said something like it took her 3 months to dry out.
And she never lost that weight. So they're upside down. And the preacher convinces them that they're upside down. And the only way to get out is to climb up to the bottom of the ship because the little boy knows, Robin knows, when he was on his, air quotes, private tour with one of the first mates, that the steel is thinnest at the outer hull. It's only about an inch thick. And so they think that's their only way out is to climb up to the bottom of the ship and hopefully figure out what to do there.
The outer hull in the engine room.
Exactly. Yeah, the outer hull in the engine room. So it's funny because we're watching this movie and we're thinking, well, I guess that makes sense. But if you were really in that situation, would you think like that those 6 actors and follow Gene Hackman, or would you stay down with the purser and the preacher and wait for help? That's like the quandary of the Poseidon Adventure.
I think I would have gone with Gene Hackman because to me it wouldn't make sense to be waiting upside down on the bottom, on the top of the ship, which is really now the bottom of the ship. It seemed like what our cast is doing seems illogical, but it seems even more illogical just to stand there waiting for the ship to sink.
Yeah, we're talking about logic in a ridiculously scenario, but yeah.
At least Gene Hackman's like, we got a chance.
Well,
he even said at one point that our odds aren't good, but we get a chance instead of standing down there waiting to drown.
I would have thought, how many Oscars do you have? How many Oscars do you have? I think I'm going to follow the Oscar winners. Thanks. Okay, bye, everybody. But it turned out to be the right choice because the minute, well, not the minute, but very close to the minute they all escape up out of the ballroom, it floods with water. So like, good choice. Yeah. Right decision there. Right decision there. And they begin their slow ascent to the bottom of the ship. And as I said, I don't want to do plot point by plot point. I don't remember every room they were in because it's all so convoluted. But that set, looking at that set, where they go through the kitchen and they go through the other outer hall, all the places. I guess I didn't go through the outer hall, but when they're going through the ship and the catacombs of the ship, do you know that was really based on? Oh, we should probably say that the exterior shots of the ship were the Queen Mary.
Yep.
The beginning scenes were all shot on the Queen Mary, and so the interiors of the sets that were constructed at 20th Century Fox are replicas of actual rooms in the Queen Mary. So there's a scene in the barbershop. Remember where the chairs are upside down and red buttons, and Carol Lindley are talking about, oh, that's a good way to get your hair cut. My favorite scene is when Robin, the little boy, goes into the bathroom and the urinals are all upside down, and you immediately think, ooh, what's on the floor? What's on the ground now?
Yeah.
All the water came out. But I love the lighting in those scenes because they're now walking on the ceiling. The lights that are working are lighting upward. So they're all scary looking as hell. Did you notice that? There's one shot of them and they all look like demonic because they're all being lit from below. It's incredible.
Yeah, you really feel like this is an upside down ship.
Yes.
It's so well done. Going back to the purser.
Yes.
Before we continue on with these. But actually, I got a couple things to say about the purser and the sets. Gene Hackman's character says, because the purser's like, we need to stay here. We can go up, which is down, to be saved. And Gene Hackman says, the captain and all that crew are dead. And the purser says, how do you know? Like, how do you know? It doesn't take a genius.
That purser.
But regarding the sets, I can kind of see where this only cost $5 million because most of the sets were small. The ballroom was really the only big set.
Yeah, true.
The rest were small corridors.
True.
And I'm sure they repeated, all they got to do is change a pipe here and there, and they can repeat them over and over again. So when I think about it, it kind of makes sense that that's all. To me, the most expensive part were the big tanks of water and the water flowing.
Yeah.
Most likely.
And dangerous. But think about all that fire. Fire all over the place, and the water rushing in, and the scene where Robin is off exploring and he goes into the bathroom and then he gets kind of lost and pulled behind.
Yes.
And what happened was then that Gene Hackman goes and gets him and brings him to the rest, and the water starts rushing in. And that was another instance where they lifted up the set. And the water got really, really deep. And Gene Hackman said he had a few moments there where he thought, I'm going under here. This is not good. But they managed to make it. I think you have to make the set small out of necessity, obviously, because of the budget. But also, I think because of the fact that that's how big those rooms were. They were based on real rooms in the Queen Mary.
Especially back then. I mean, they're still small today, but back then they were tiny.
Oh, absolutely. Well, this was an old luxury liner. This wasn't a Princess Cruise. This wasn't the Love Boat.
No.
Well, even though Stella Stevens was later on the Love Boat, too. It wasn't the Love Boat. This was an older ship, and those rooms were small and very, very cramped and claustrophobic. So I think it's amazing. I also think that these actors, I mean, come on. Not only are most of them doing a lot of their own stunts, flying around on their asses, like Ernest Borgnine said, but they were filthy.
Yeah.
They have to get, you have to go to work, and you didn't go to makeup. You were made down. You were covered in dirt and water. And can you imagine how uncomfortable that would be to do every single day?
I didn't think of that until I saw, I think it was Jack Albertson who handed Shelley Winters his kerchief or his napkin. And that was the first time I really noticed how filthy she was.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, she's really dirty. And they all are.
Yeah. Yeah. They're all
sweaty.
filthy. Yeah. It was incredibly uncomfortable. So you can imagine the director, Ronald Neame, said they were all, though, incredibly, and these aren't young people. Okay. I mean, yes, Shelley Winters, Jack Albertson, Gene Hackman was in his mid-40s. So, okay. So these aren't young people, but he said they were all very professional. He said they had there was a breakdown a week. One actor, he said, they all had their turn in having a breakdown, and there were 10 of them. So he said one a week, and that's all I really had to deal with. And he said, no, I could deal with that. That was fine. But everyone had at least one breakdown. So as we said, so they begin to climb up, and poor Roddy is the first to go. Because Roddy never won that supporting actor Oscar. So Roddy is out of there. Roddy has an injured leg. So who do we have here? We should probably say the survivors. We've got the Rosens. We've got Mr. and Mrs. Rosen. That's 2. Pamela Sin and her brother. That's 4. Ergen Sporgnine and Stella Stevens. That's 6. The preacher, 7. Roddy, 8. 9, 10. So there are 10, yeah. Nani and Red Button. So there's 10.
Red Button.
So Roddy, first one to go, bye-bye.
Yes.
He's out of here. And they continue to climb, and they continue to climb up, and they have all kinds of adventures. And then who is the next one to find their unfortunate end? Do you remember?
I'm trying to think if there's anyone between him and Stella Stevens. And
No, there's a big one between him and Stella Stevens.
oh my God. Yes. Shelley Winters.
The biggest one of all. Yes.
Yes.
Do you want to, can you set the scene up a little bit about why Shelley Winters meets her not untimely, but meets her demise?
Yeah.
I guess untimely.
As Tony said, Shelley was a big woman. She brings up throughout the whole movie that she keeps calling herself fat. And there's even a point in the movie where the character Robin, the little boy, kind of compares her, not in a mean way, just trying to help her feel better, compares her to a 600-pound fish.
Well, Stella Stevens comes out and calls her a fat ass at one point.
Well, Stella Stevens calls her a fat ass. But this is part where the humor comes in, and it's all very believable. That's one thing I like about you said there's humor in. There's a lot of it in, but it's not like, here's a drama, oh, let's throw something funny in.
Yeah.
It really is seamless in the storyline.
Yeah,
so
it is.
He compares it to a 600-pound fish that he had caught at one time. And then as they're climbing to safety, and he says, I'm sorry, Mrs. Rosen. And she said, for what? And he says, I didn't mean to say that you were like a 600-pound fish. And she goes, all of this, and that's what you're worried about? I love that. So anyway, they get to this point where Gene Hackman's character, Reverend Scott, there's debate of whether they're going to continue this quest to safety anyway. And he goes, well, let me go find the engine room and I'll come back.
Right.
So he finds the engine room. He comes back. He says, I've been there. So when the whole group of them goes, all of a sudden, a huge section that he had walked through is now underwater.
Right.
And so he takes a rope and he swims through the water so that the others can hold the rope and pull themselves through, and he gets stuck. And before that happens, Belle Rosen, Shelley Winters, is saying, I was a champion in New York, or I think it was New York.
Yeah,
I was a swimming champion.
Underwater swimmer.
Yeah, and she keeps showing her medal that she won. She's very proud of this medal that she won. And she keeps saying, I'm the best qualified. And he's like, no. And she lets him go. Well, when they realize that he's caught and trapped, she dives in.
A beautiful dive.
Yeah. I mean, she looked like she was in the Olympics.
Yeah.
So she swims underwater, and boy, you can tell she was underwater for quite some time, and you could tell that is Shelley Winters swimming through there.
It is.
She gets him unhooked from whatever he was trapped on. She takes him to the end where they were able to get back out to get to the engine room, and she has a heart attack.
Well, she says what is her famous final line, which I'm saying all the time? in the water, I'm a very skinny lady.
Oh, yes. She says, in the water, I'm a very skinny lady. But then she has a heart attack. And,
yeah.
and
She has
it's
a heart
heartbreaking. And she tells the minister to give the medal to her, tell Jack Albertson to give the medal to their grandson.
Right.
And what I really like is that's the point where the minister says, why this woman? And he's screaming to God.
Yeah.
Why this woman? Because she's such a wonderful person.
He's
It is
definitely
absolutely heartbreaking.
He's definitely a New Age minister, Gene Hackman.
Yes.
Reverend Scott in this. Yeah. But what's heartbreaking about that scene is, yes, and she even says before they dive in, she goes, you've been pulling me along. Please, you've been helping the fat lady. Let me do something. Let me do something to help you. You guys have been all helping me, pushing her up that Christmas tree to get her out and pulling her up the plankway. So it's Mrs. Rosen's opportunity to do something. And it's so beautiful because she does it. And she's right. She is the best. She's trained. She can do this. And she does it. And she has the famous last line. And then, and she has a heart attack. And you're like, oh, Mrs. Rosen. Oh, it's very sad.
She died a hero.
She did. But she did give the Reverend her little medal to give to Jack Albertson to take to their grandson in Israel because they've never seen their grandson. He's 2 years old. They were on their way to see him. Very sad. So she's gone, and they're almost to the engine room. And they get to a certain point where they're outside the engine room, and that's where the outer hall, where it's only about an inch thick. And they're almost there. However, they have to climb up a scaffolding. And that's when we have to say goodbye. There's an explosion in the ship, because all during this time there have been random explosions. Stella Stevens, why are you climbing that scaffolding in your high heels? I don't know. Boom. And down goes Linda. It's Erna Borgnine. You took the one thing I loved. And that's where Stella Stevens meets her end. And Ernest Borgnine has a freak out. He freaks out on the minister. He says he almost believed him because this entire time he's been telling Gene Hackman, how do you know? Where you know you're going? Why should we trust you? And he gets to the point where he almost believes him. And then the love of his life, the love of my life, dies. And that's when they have their confrontation. And this is the part that really always gets me. And while they're having this confrontation, a steam pipe breaks. And it's suddenly it's directly hitting the door, the handle to the door to the engine room. So they can't get in it. The only way to do it is to turn what do you want to call it, that wheel handle? But you can't get to it. You have to, you have to jump. We're doing like hand signals, like people know what we're doing here. It's a circular handle.
You had to turn the wheel to turn off the steam.
And the only way to do it is to jump on it. But then what are you going to do? You can't go anywhere. There's no ground. So Gene Hackman jumps on it, sacrifices himself, turns off the steam, and then lets go of the handle and falls to his death too. But before he says that, he has his argument with God, like after Mrs. Rosen died, then he has this argument with, take me. Why? Not enough for you, God? Not enough sacrifices? How many did you need? Take me. And so at the end, he's the ultimate hero because his sacrifice allows the rest of them to get to the engine room.
Yeah, and he adds that we weren't asking you to help us, but why are you working against us?
Yeah, exactly.
Great line.
Exactly, yeah. So the survivors get to the engine room, and wouldn't you know it, at that exact moment, they hear noises outside. There just happens to be a rescue team right there at that very moment.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous, but having people just sitting on the floor hanging out for 30 minutes would be kind of boring.
Yeah, you couldn't do that. So indeed, they make noises. They hit the metal, and they communicate with the rescue team outside, and they are able to get them out. They open up a hole in the bottom of the boat, and they climb out. And they fly away. And that is the end of the Poseidon Adventure. But it wasn't the original ending. Do you know what the original ending was, Brad?
Well, you said the ship sinks.
In the book. But in the film,
okay,
there was a shot of the film of the ship. as they were going away, because the ending's very strange. They just get in this helicopter and fly off. You think, all that, and this is the ending? We don't get an idea of the scope of this?
And the rescue crew jumps in the helicopter with them. It's like, okay, this is all there is. We're leaving now.
Okay. Bye-bye. See ya. Done. We got how many? Head count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, yeah, let's go. They're gone. Well, originally there was a shot of the ship as they were pulling away in the helicopter, and you could see the whole thing. You could see the whole Poseidon upside down. But it was such a bad shot because it was a miniature. And Allen said, please let us go in and reshoot that. And 20th Century Fox would not let them do it. They're like, nope, you're done. Movie's done. Get out of here. So that's why the movie ends kind of abruptly, because they weren't able to do that grand last shot of the entire ship. But kind of interesting because it also laid the groundwork for the sequel. Because the sequel of this film, which we'll talk about, Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, picks up with the helicopter going away. That's where the first one ends, the second one begins. It's really kind of funny how they work that in there.
See, I didn't remember that. I think I tried to erase that film from my mind.
Well, what happens in Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, just quickly, is the captain of a tugboat spies the helicopter leaving the Poseidon Adventure with the survivors, and he heads up to the shipwreck site to claim salvage rights, and they enter the ship through the hull opening, and then they come across all kinds of other survivors. So yeah, it's a real crappy movie. It was a huge bomb. Sally Field, Michael Caine, Telly Savalas, for God's sakes. I think even Shirley Jones was in that with Slim Pickens. So yeah. So anyway, our movie, The Poseidon Adventure, that's the end of The Poseidon Adventure. That's the true story of those survivors, or the air quotes true story of those survivors. So let's talk a little bit about how the movie did when it was released.
Okay. So this movie, it was, as you said before, it was made for $5 million. And how much did you say it earned?
It earned $126 million.
Not too shabby. It was just behind The Godfather. Of course, Godfather is going to be explosive that year. But it was number 2.
Right.
And number 3 was a movie that is so beloved to you and I, was What's Up, Doc?
Yes.
Followed by Deliverance. The next one just cracks me up. The next one was Deep Throat.
Oh.
And then Jeremiah Johnson.
Oh, God. This is some interesting movies. Nice mix there.
Yes. But, I looked at the rest of the year, and there weren't that many good movies. The only other one that I can think of is Cabaret that people like. Other nominees for Best Picture were The Immigrants and Sounder. I'm not familiar with either of those.
Sounder's a wonderful film.
At least by name.
Sounder's a wonderful film, yeah. But, I mean, these were the big ones. I mean, it's the year of The Godfather and Cabaret. So the fact that the Poseidon Adventure came in there between the two of them and was number 2 is pretty remarkable. Pretty remarkable.
But no surprise. It's a fun movie.
It is a fun movie. It is. It's a fun movie. To me, as I said, it really is the first of the disaster films. It's the father of them. Absolutely.
And on Rotten Tomatoes, it has 81% critic rating and an audience score of 76%, which I'm a little surprised by the audience score, but it's still pretty good. It's still fresh.
Yeah. I think it's so much more imaginative than some of the other disaster movies that came after it. I mean, think about it. He had $5 million to make this, and it looks phenomenal, which I don't know that Poseidon is quite as phenomenal, Brad. What do you think?
No, it's terrible.
I knew you'd give me an honest answer.
And let me explain why. Because, you said airport, it took forever to get to the disaster.
Right.
This movie shrank it. As you said, Poseidon Adventure, it took almost 30 minutes. It's 28 minutes and 13 seconds when the wave hits the ship. Poseidon in 2006, the wave hits 11 minutes earlier at 17 minutes and 30 seconds. Now, the thing is, 10 minutes doesn't sound like a lot, but in movie time, that's huge.
It is.
That is huge. Also, this Poseidon Adventure was 1 hour and 57 minutes, whereas the movie Poseidon was 1 hour and 38 minutes. Now, the reason this is important is we got to know, in that first 28 minutes, we got to know these characters. We got to know their personalities. We got to know what they did. We got to like them or hate them, whatever it was we're supposed to do with these characters. We felt like they mattered to us. They did matter to us. So if somebody was in danger or if somebody died, it mattered. It mattered.
Yeah.
Poseidon, 2006, you didn't give a damn what happened to any of them. Even Richard Dreyfuss, who I liked, just was who I like, not liked in this film. It's just, you had this star-studded cast again, and with a horrible script, horribly unlikable characters. They used CGI rather than practical effects, and it showed. They were terrible. Granted, the bolts popping and the waves coming in were more believable than the original version, but it was all CGI. So I didn't appreciate it nearly as much as the original did. So here's the deal, especially when it comes to these two films. The budget on the original film was $5 million.
Mm-hmm.
So adjusted for inflation, that comes out to $38 million. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Poseidon, the new version, one with all the CGI, cost $160 million to make.
Oh my God.
And it wasn't even close to as good a film. And here's the thing. The first film earned, for its time, it made $80 million. I don't know what that equates to today.
$126 million.
$126 million.
Yes.
Poseidon, the new one, cost $160 million to make, and it grossed $180 million. $20 million. And I'm probably guessing with marketing and everything else, it was a loss.
Oh, of course it was. Yeah.
It was a
Yeah,
loss.
you usually have to double a film's budget to kind of get an idea if it was a loss or not. Yeah.
Yeah, so let me take us further back in time with these other films. You had this movie, you had Airport, where we got to know the characters. We had Tower and Inferno. We got the setup for quite a while. Earthquake, it was quite a while. Granted, neither of us think Earthquake was a very good movie, but it was quite a good setup. You got to know who the characters were and how they interact and what the relationships were before the earthquake hit. Now, with the new Poseidon, you have Greenland, you have, now you're going to mention Sharknado, but you have Twister, you have Outbreak, Volcano, San Andreas, etc. The Perfect Storm. Well, not The Perfect Storm, but The Day After Tomorrow. Some of these movies are fun, but you're watching because the CGI is fun, and you're watching the world be destroyed. But as far as being good movies, they're not. They're not. Like, I love Volcano. It's a fun, stupid movie. But is it a good movie? Oh, my God, hell no. And you don't know any of the characters, and it's so absurd the way people die. So, to me, it's sad what has happened to the disaster films. Very sad. Because now it's all about special effects and how are people going to die.
You know, it's like everything else. You know, it's like people take something, they bastardize it. They take it too far. It's like, no, that's not good enough. We got to make it better. We got to make it bigger. We got to make it, you know, more terrifying. We got to kill more people. You know, and you look at this I said this about Airport. It's a very conservative take. Now, this movie isn't. This movie definitely pushed it far, but it's all so wonderful because they did make it bigger. They did make it stronger, but they did the right things. They made the right things bigger. They made the characters more interesting. The characters are put more humor into the story. And I don't find a lot of humor in a lot of these new ones. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, there's some humor here, but you're not, please, it ain't Stella Stevens and Pamela Sue Martin swimming in their high heels. Or Pamela Sue Martin tearing off her long skirt and having identical red hot pants underneath.
Yes, that was hysterical.
I'm like, you were planning for this, weren't you? You know, and the thing about the thing I find interesting about Beyond the Poseidon Adventure is it wasn't Irwin Allen's first idea. In 1973, soon after this film first came out, he proposed a sequel that would have the survivors testifying in a hearing on the disaster in Austria. And because that's where the ship's parent company, Poseidon's parent company was. And while they were on a train to the hearing, the tunnel would collapse and they're trapped again.
Oh, no.
I'm like, that might be a little too much there, Irwin.
That sounds like Die Hard kind of thing.
Might be a bit too much to put these people through this again. I mean, Jack Albertson would be like, are you kidding me? What? So that's why Beyond the Poseidon Adventure came along in 79. And you were talking about budgets. It's interesting. So Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, which, by the way, was directed by Irwin Allen. Yeah. Beyond the Poseidon Adventure had a $10 million budget. And do you know how much it made?
I'm going to guess it lost.
Big time. $2 million. It made $2 million.
Oh, my Lord.
So, yeah, there weren't going to be any more beyond the Poseidon Adventure. That was pretty much it.
Yeah, and like I said, I couldn't finish watching it. And this was back in the day when you didn't have 600 channels to just flip over to something else. So that was pretty rare for me back in those days, just to say, I give up.
It's a bad, you're like Michael Caine, Sally Field, Shirley Jones. What were you thinking?
I know.
But
And let me go to the granddaddy of disaster movies that many people think is the best, and that's Titanic. And I want to talk about the comparison between that movie and this movie and where I think these movies go wrong today. So we talked about the side story with the guy that works for the corporation who was saying, don't take on the ballast. And that's the reason why the ship, that was a side story that was unnecessary. We both agreed, but it was very quick.
Right.
The Titanic was a horrible disaster where hundreds, thousands of people died. So why was it necessary to have a shootout and all this other garbage in the film that was totally unnecessary? Yeah. Again, they seem to think that what happened is not enough. Let's make up some other side story that is meaningless.
I know. The fact that this unsinkable ship sank isn't enough. Let's have a little shootout. Let's have a little side story.
And that's why I hate Titanic. There were so many of those things. I'm just like...
This is the problem with remakes. This is the problem. I have the same problem with Kenneth Branagh's remakes of Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile. It's not enough. They got to make it bigger. They got to put more into it. As we said before, suddenly Hercule Poirot becomes a action hero. It's not enough that he's a brilliant criminal mind. You know what I mean? He's got to become an action hero. They got to gild the lily to the point where the frickin' lily falls apart. And that's what I love about this movie. That's what I love about this movie. This is it. This is pure. This is, in my mind, the best of all the disaster films. I put Towering Inferno really close, but this one I think is at the top. Yeah,
I totally agree. Let me go back to Titanic because there's a story behind this. When I lived in Las Vegas, I worked there. My corporation moved me there, and it was not long after I was there. I had a breakup, so I was all alone, and I was new there, so I hardly knew anyone at all. Well, I had to have surgery, gallbladder surgery. So I was sent home, and I was home alone with, nothing, no one to talk to. No. So fortunately at that time, before I got cable, the cable company said, you know what, we're going to be doing work. So we can't guarantee when cable will be up and we can't guarantee when cable will be down. So everybody in this area gets cable for free this month. Oh. So I got it. There were only 2 movies that played over and over and over again. The Lost in Space remake with Matt LeBlanc. And he looked delicious, but that was about the only thing good about that film. And Titanic. And both are, to me, terrible movies. Though I will admit I enjoyed watching Titanic over and over again, only because the special effects and the death scenes were phenomenal. But that's all. I would not have turned it on otherwise. But it was enjoyable to me, like each time I saw something new as far as effects go.
Well, Brad, is there anything more we want to say about the Poseidon Adventure or the podcast or anything at all?
Well, as far as the Poseidon Adventure goes, if you haven't seen it or it's been a while, please watch it. And I actually would suggest you watch Poseidon afterwards, just if you're curious about what I'm talking about and can see how far downhill we've gone when it comes to disaster films. But only if you're that curious, because it's not worth it for any other reason. Beyond that, I'm just going to say the usual. If you are new listening to our show, and this is your first or second or few times, please subscribe so that you'll know the next time that an episode comes out. We try to do it every week. We do a pretty good job of that. If you have been listening to us, once again, you've been listening to us for an hour or so you must like us pretty well. Why don't you go and rate and review the show? Spotify and Apple make it the easiest to do, especially Apple, but very good chance, whatever app you're listening to us, you have some way to rate this show.
That sounds fair. I think that's fair. Well, Brad, I guess there's only one thing left to say, but Mrs. Peter Pan, I'm not. So let's not say goodbye. Let's say au revoir.
No, let's say goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody.
And bon voyage.
Oh, I like that better.
That's all, folks.